This is the TSG Multimedia podcast for August of 2021. We're sponsored this month by Podomatic and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Thank you very much. I'm your host, John Abaticola. I have some updates from last month, information about upcoming events and upcoming programs here on the channel, responses to viewer comments, and a bunch of cool catches in our Catch of the Month segment. Now, before we get to all that, please remember to hit the thumbs up icon if you like the programs on this channel. Also, leaving a comment in the comments section below helps me know if you like what I'm doing here. I always mention that you can help support my work by becoming a part of the TSG Train Crew. That's what I call our supporters on Patreon. It's as cheap as 7 cents a day, and it helps me bring the content you enjoy to the channel. You can also grab some branded merchandise by clicking on the links just below the video player on your computer screen. Get yourself a t-shirt or a mug or a phone case or whatever, and show the world that you're one of the best viewers on YouTube when you go out chasing trains for the rest of the summer. So let's talk about what happened since I last came to you with a podcast. July was a huge month. The month when the NMRA National Convention happened. The convention took up most of my time between April and July, and it's even been taking up quite a bit of time after it ended on the 10th. And I'll get to all that in a minute. I want to back up a little bit before that first. On July 3rd, I met up with my friends Nick, John, and Dave to run some trains at the SBHRS. That was really great because I hadn't seen these guys much since the pandemic started. And I also got to run a train on the HO scale layout, which is something else I hadn't done in a long time. I took my MP15 DC and ran some cars out to a small yard on the branch line. And on the way, I came across the most amazing working model of a wigwag that I've ever seen. And I was floored. It wasn't there the last time I was at the depot, so I asked John about it, and he told me that Mike Stockwell made it. I had to get Mike to talk about it on camera because it is so cool. So check this out.
So first of all, I saw these wigwags on, I think it was Showcase Miniatures, and I wanted to figure out how to actuate it. And so I scoured the internet on how to do it, and most people were using some type of rod or some type of mechanism like that. But I wanted it to look realistic and see, kind of like no hands, nothing moving. So I started playing with magnets, and I thought, what if I use a neodymium magnet? So I put it on a board and started playing with it and glued some magnets on the back. Ultimately, I ended up with a servo that went back and forth, and with a neodymium magnet on it, and then a neodymium magnet on the target, and they would oppose each other and it'd swing back and forth. So the next thing to do was to come up with a bell. So I finally found a wigwag on the internet, and I took the recording from that wigwag, and I added it to a sound chip here. And then I had to time the wigwag swing to match the bell. And so I came up with this. So an Arduino drives it all. It uses 2 infrared sensors, one on either side of the track. And I'm only using timing. So if you drive into it, it goes for 10 seconds. And then when you leave, it just stops. But it's long enough that if you drive a train into it and then drive out, it'll stay running until the train exits. If you were to stop a train right over the grade, it would it would stop eventually. So it has a small speaker there, and then it has an Arduino underneath it driving the servo, which moves the target with the magnet. So I'm working on a target with a light in it, but it's very difficult to overcome the tensile strength of a magnet wire. So what I'm using is I took apart a little teeny speaker from like one of the Cube speakers, and I took that wire, which is like the strength of a hair. It's actually less than a hair. And I took one side of the LED and I bonded it to the pewter, and then use a wire off the pewter. So that's how I do one side of the LED. And then the other side is a magnet wire off the back that goes down the back post so you can't see it.
Anyway, that little jaunt to the depot was the calm before the storm. The storm happened from the 6th through the 10th. And I had been talking about the NMRA National Convention for months ahead of time. It turned out, by all accounts, to be a huge success. We had hoped to get somewhere between 200 or maybe 300 attendees, and get this, over 600 people registered to attend, and all the preparation and hard work really paid off. Not only did we deliver on everything we thought it would be, but judging by the feedback I've seen so far from attendees, everyone who attended felt the same way. I'm not going to sit and recap for the next hour, but I do want to say that we had the best volunteers I've ever seen, and the attendees were also really great. And what I mean by that is there were a few instances where the platform we used for the convention didn't exactly work as planned, and not a single person complained. That seems unheard of these days, so I want to express my gratitude to both the volunteers and the attendees. Thanks so much for making that event such a great success. It really made all the effort that it took to put it on very much worthwhile. Something I learned from the virtual convention is that there are a lot of people who are left out when all we do is have in-person events. They're left out for any number of reasons. It could be a mobility issue, or it could be financial issues, or even something like just not being able to take an entire week off of work or away from the family. I think it's important for all of us to consider whether we should exclude people who want to participate but can't for reasons beyond their control. I think you know from watching this channel that I am a huge proponent of including as many people as possible in our hobbies, especially if they want to be included but have extenuating circumstances that make it difficult for them. What do you think? Put a comment in the comments section below to let everyone know. Should we try to be as inclusive as possible? Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, but I got to tell you, the NMRA convention really took a lot out of me, and I've been pretty relieved since it ended, to be honest. And I spent the next week or so after the 10th recovering, if you want to call it that. I didn't really do anything production related until the 17th, when I went live with Bernard Helen of Mini Prints. You might know miniprints.com, to talk about super detailing scenes on model railroads and the influence of 3D printing on the hobby of model railroading. If you didn't get to see this episode of TSG Live Model Railroading, definitely check it out on the replay. Then on the 18th, we streamed a TSG Live Crew Lounge episode summarizing some of the things that we learned from Rails by the Bay 2021, and we discussed the future of virtual events. I think it's clear that we should all pursue the idea of having some form of virtual conventions for the reasons I outlined a minute ago. Now, whether it's a 100% virtual convention that happens opposite the in-person convention, like 6 months before or after, or a hybrid that combines some virtual component with the in-person convention when it happens. I also think it's critical that the NMRA seriously consider the same if it wants to be relevant in the future. There are far too many people, many of whom are members of the NMRA, who can't go to in-person conventions, and it makes no sense to me at all to leave them out in the cold when we have the technology to include them. So anyway, on July 21st, I went live with Michelle Kempema for our monthly live call-in show. We talked about the influence of steam restoration projects on the hobby of model railroading, and the possible resurgence of people's interest in steam due to the various restored steam equipment making appearances these days. We also had a chance to talk to our friend Mark Stafford, who's been working on a special proto steam throttle. It's something like the Iowa Scaled Engineering proto throttle that's for diesel locomotives, but Mark's steam throttle is for steam locomotives. This is also worth catching on the replay if you missed us live. On the 22nd, we went to Ray Turner's Mystic Mountain Garden Railroad with Murph for an op session. You might remember the Mystic Mountain Railroad. It was featured on a layout tour right here on the channel on our layout tour series. It's that big garden layout in the east foothills of San Jose that was built for operations. The op session was one of Ray's evening sessions, which meant we were also treated to a great sunset in addition to the regular fun of operations. While there, I caught up with Sam Romerstein. I knew Sam's name from Seth Newman's layout tour because Sam helped Seth with his backdrops on his layout and was once one of Seth's regulars at his Monday night work sessions. I asked Sam to tell the viewers what he thinks about operating at Ray's layout. This is our amazing engineer, Sam. This is the first time we've worked together on the train crew. What were your thoughts about our little run there, Sam?
Well, we had lots of fun, and we both shared in the decisions. Both had good ideas, and we had a few mistakes, but we got through it. It was great, and the weather's perfect, and the sunset's even better.
It really is. Look at that. Jeez. On July 23rd, I went to Roaring Camp to ride the narrow gauge train. My friend CJ was going to be in town, and I've been wanting to go to Roaring Camp for a while anyway to see our mutual friend Kevin Hill doing conductor duty. Kevin is a big Disney fan, and I think that he's found a way to combine enough interesting and sometimes entertaining information into his narrative on the ride to keep people's attention, but he also pauses the narration so that the riders can listen to the steam engine working on the steep grades. I hadn't seen CJ in quite some time, so it was also great to hang out with him. And it just so happened that someone else named Ken Middlebrook was also there. I know Ken from a few different places, including Billy Jones' Wildcat Railroad. As a matter of fact, he's the engineer on the cover of the DVD that I produced at that railroad back in 2008. Well, it turns out that Ken's also involved with the restoration of Southern Pacific 2479. Remember I mentioned this locomotive recently? It's a Pacific Class 462 locomotive whose sisters 2467 and 2472 have a really special place in the Bay Area. I mentioned it because 2479 is being moved to Niles Canyon to become part of the railroad there. And what's more is that the roundhouse and turntable that used to be at the Southern Pacific Lenzin facility are also being moved and reconstructed in Niles. Since Ken is close to that project, I asked him to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Ken Middlebrook of the California Trolley Railroad Corporation, and I'm the president of the organization. And I know if people have heard the news, but our locomotive 2479, large Pacific locomotive built for the Southern Pacific Railroad, we're moving from the county fairgrounds in San Jose to Niles Canyon. This is an exciting effort for us to continue with the restoration of the locomotive, add an appropriate location for it to be able to operate in Niles Canyon. We're creating a partnership with the Pacific Locomotive Association. In addition to the locomotive, we're going to be moving the roundhouse, the old London roundhouse that was in San Jose, as was part of our plans for a long-term museum in San Jose, which unfortunately is not going to occur. This is a great opportunity for us. We're all excited. And one thing about this move is that it's a continuation of the effort that we've put into both the locomotive restoration and the effort of rebuilding the roundhouse as part of the museum project. This is all possible through funds provided by the Santa Clara County, who ironically own the locomotive and the roundhouse. And the idea here is that when the items get moved to Niles Canyon, that they will be in turn donated to the Pacific Locomotive Association. But the locomotive itself is still undergoing restoration. Of course, over the next year or so, we're going to be doing preparation for moving it. But the locomotive all the running gear has been redone. Tender, of course, has been done. All the appliances have been redone. And there's final boiler work that needs to occur. And we're working with that right now to try to get that all together. The nice thing about this is now we have a new relationship with the steam crew in Niles Canyon. And so it's all positive. Everybody's happy with this. And the main thing about here is that these historical artifacts from our community are going to be in an appropriate location where the public can enjoy for years to come. So that's it for now, but stay tuned from CTRC. You can visit us at ctrc.org. We have several Facebook pages. The one thing is Southern Pacific Steam Locomotive 2479 on Facebook. So thank you.
This is really huge news for steam fans in the Bay Area, and it will undoubtedly improve the Niles Canyon Railway's standing as a truly world-class operating museum. So on the 24th, we went to Railtown 1897 for a special event. I mentioned this on the last podcast. They had a special run of Sierra number 28 in the late afternoon, which included some run-bys, as well as a special tour of the grounds there at the railroad after the train ride. It was really cool, and I documented it for a video that'll be out later this month. I want to take just a minute to thank Mike Ninneman for the invitation to this really cool event, and Mike said that they're hoping to do more events like this in the future. You can check out railtown1897.org to keep up with when the next photo tour gets announced. It's definitely worth going when they do it again. Something else happened on this day, and this is really cool. While we were out enjoying the photographer's special event, I got an email on my phone informing me that the channel had eclipsed 10 million views. 10 million! I never thought this would happen, but thanks to all of you, it did. And I feel humbled and flattered at the same time. So thanks so much for watching and also for your continued support. I feel pretty lucky to be able to get to do something that I really enjoy, and I'm glad that you're all a part of it. Anyway, the photography tour event had a late ending time, so we stayed overnight in the area and met up with Mike and TSG Train Crew member Garrett Franklin for breakfast before heading home on Sunday. I wanted to go to Los Gatos to the Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad on Sunday, the day we came home, because they were having an event called Billy Jones Day, and I knew from talking to CJ and Ken during the train ride at Roaring Camp that they were going to be double-heading both of their steam engines at Billy Jones, but unfortunately we didn't get back to the area in time to document that event. I spent the majority of the following week producing several product spotlight programs for the channel, and I had the chance to attend another op session at Silicon Valley Lines on Friday the 30th. I got invited by James Brasil, so I went with my friend John Wiley and operated for a couple hours. Right, so we're doing a little operating here at Silicon Valley Lines and following the local protocols for the masks. Plus, I think we all look better with these on too, don't we? I think that's the general consensus. Anyway, so this will be a fun thing to do before having to delve headfirst into podcast week next week. It was a lot of fun as always, and we were able to run 3 jobs before bailing out. I want to thank James for the invitation and also thank John for going. It's always a lot more fun to operate with a 2-man crew, right, instead of doing it alone. The next morning we went to the SBHRS to deliver a thank you card to Jack Marash, who helped with the convention earlier in the month. And while we were there, we also got to socialize with a bunch of people we haven't seen since before the pandemic started. And while I was there, I caught up with my friend Robin Gilstrom. You've seen Robin on the channel before. He's the guy who had an N-scale McKean car that he was working on a while back. He also went to Salt Lake City with me and Wiley back in 2018. Well, when I saw him, he was setting up to run a train on the N-scale layout, and it was nothing but unusual stuff. I asked him if I could record it and have him tell us about it. So check this out.
Now that COVID is somewhat getting over, we've got a long ways to go, but I had a lot of time on my hands during that, and I like to do unique carloads and stuff, so I had a lot of flat cars. So as you will see when we show you the train itself, which should be going by about now, I built all sorts of different things, anything from helicopter on a flat car to a bomb on a flat car. You'll see all these different ones, and I just had fun. That's what I get out of modeling, is I love to model and build things, particularly unique things, buildings, cars, stuff. I'm not into running trains that much. I like to just use my hands skills and stuff and build trains. and just have a good time doing that. It takes my mind away, which is great. One of the other projects that I had was a McKean car. This was a kit that came in as a donation to our club here at the Santa Clara Train Depot, and nobody wanted it, so I took it home, and it was just sheet brass etched and some cast resin roof and a few other parts, and in the pictures you can see how I built it up, and now it runs. One of the challenges for it was there was no front cowcatcher pilot, and I had to build that. I built that out of a gold medal model Venetian blinds and some brass sheeting. It's not perfect, but it's just one of those things that I've enjoyed building and putting together, and it is extremely unique. I don't think you'll find another McKean car in N scale anywhere. They've never made them. So another thing for you to enjoy looking at.
Robin wants to share the McKean car project in more detail with us here on the channel, so I'm recording with him this month for that. I think you'll like it. And finally, last Sunday, I went to record with Jack Burgess for this month's episode of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. In this episode, Jack shares his approach to model railroad photography, how he does it, and how he gets his photos to turn out well enough to be published in model railroading magazines. It's another episode really full of great tricks. I have some viewer comments to share with you this month. The first one comes from Dave Downey, who commented on the TSG Live Crew Lounge episode about the future of virtual conventions that I talked about earlier on this podcast. And he says, I am a life member of the NMRA and have attended 4 national conventions and worked on another national convention. The NMRA needs to provide value to its members. NMRA-X and the current magazine provide value. The Santa Clara Convention was a huge success from a content and technical perspective. Your entire team should be congratulated. Thank you. The format of pre-recording your clinics and providing a way to communicate with the clinician was a spectacular concept. I understand that you can't make a hybrid virtual convention that would run concurrently with an in-person convention, but the NMRA should consider recording the National Convention clinics and archiving them in a members, I'm laughing because it's so long, and archiving them in a members-only area of its website. Will your clinics be archived? I cannot afford the money to travel to a national convention. If a convention attracts 1,200 members, there are still almost 18,000 sitting at home. A virtual component can reach those 18,000. The NMRA must recognize the opportunity and go after it. You proved that the technology works. Again, thanks, Dave Downey, NMRA Life Member from Winnipeg, Manitoba. It was a long comment and he said a lot there. And thank you very much for the compliments, Dave. I agree with your whole comment, except for the part where you said a hybrid can't be done concurrently with a live convention. I've already come up with a way to make a hybrid event not only possible, but also relatively easy to execute, even during a live in-person event. It's really just a matter of deciding whether somebody wants to do it or not and figuring out a way to make it happen. Would it be the same as being there? Definitely not. Would it offer 100% of the content or experience of being there? Of course not. But it would be very easy to provide a virtual audience with one clinic track and a virtual space for socializing with each other during the event. We could even have clinic goes on sessions with the clinicians just like we did at Rails by the Bay. Now, with all that being said, that's not to say that concurrent virtual events will happen. It might be better to hold virtual events on off months, like 6 months before or after the national convention. I'm not in a position to make any decisions, but I hope the people who are will think about these things and not decide to exclude people that can easily be included. You also asked about the clinics being archived. To the best of my knowledge, the clinics from Rails by the Bay are not being archived because the clinicians didn't specifically agree to that. You have to remember that the clinicians own the content in their clinics. So it's not like we can just do whatever we want to do with the recordings. The last thing I want to respond to has to do with the numbers you brought up. I think you made a good point, and that is Why should 18,000 people be excluded from one of the best events being put on by the NMRA every year? I think the answer is obvious. They shouldn't. The real question is what will be done to ensure that you can be included, and we'll find out. I can tell you that I intend to do whatever I can to help include more people in events that I'm part of. Considering the situation with the pandemic that keeps going on, I won't be surprised at all if other events end up being canceled due to health concerns. But will the people organizing those events have a plan B just in case, like we did? I sure hope so. I'm not sure they will, but if we've learned anything over the past couple of years, it's that nothing is a sure thing. Bruno Biava commented on a Jack Burgess video. This is what he said. To Jack Burgess and TSG. Thanks for your dedication to our hobby and for bringing this amazing work of art to life. Not everyone has this kind of focus or determination, or the gifts needed to bring such a vision to reality, and oftentimes we become discouraged in our pursuits. But seeing a profile of a person for whom the stars have aligned is a very encouraging thing indeed. Perhaps one of the most subtle beauties in this portrait is that Mr. Burgess has been allowed to describe his passion and work in his own words and with his own voice. It removes the clutter of two or more minds trying to communicate and allows just one to guide and inspire us. What is not apparent is the production work of the videographers and their professionalism, which shows throughout this program, and combined with Mr. Burgess has given us all enjoyment and inspiration. Bruno also left a few other very complimentary comments in other videos, and I have to say, if this is the reaction we're getting, we're doing things the right way. So, thank you very much, Bruno. And now for this month's Catch of the Month segment. Our first catch comes from Garrett Franklin, who took this shot of the number 28 making a run by for the special event I told you about earlier out at Railtown 1897. This is at a place called Quartz. Hey, while we're at it, let's take a look at one of my shots from that same event. My shot comes from Rock Siding, where the locomotive is normally run around the train for the trip back to Jamestown. Our next shot comes from Drew Struck from Sacramento. Drew caught Amtrak Train 5 running a few hours late with P42 number 5 leading the train. This was on July 14th of 2021. Next up, we have a few videos from Dave Falkenberg. The first three shots come from Jack London Square in Oakland, California in July. If you haven't been to Jack London Square, you should go sometime. It's one of the few places where mainline trains still run on the street. Not just Amtrak either. You can also catch freight trains through here sometimes. This last shot from Dave shows us the Napa Valley Wine Train. Next up, Lucas Woodward from Down Under sent in these shots. The first photo is at the Puffing Billy Railway on May 10th, as 12A prepares to depart Belgrave. The second photo was taken less than a week later on May 19th, as R-Class Hudson's R711 and R761 led the first part of the Cruise Express Southern Steam Spectacular. The third photo is of the same train about 5 hours later, but with two different engines. K-Class Consolidations K153 and K190. The fourth photo is from June 28th at Avenel on the Northeast Line as C501, CLF3, and 4904 head south to Seymour on a light engine move. The fifth and sixth photos are from July 10th when Steam Rail Victoria ran the very last steam trains out of Lucas's local station of Lilydale. This shot is the A2 on the second shuttle to Ringwood. And this shot is of K153 arriving at Lilydale. Here's something different, some modern train shots from Germany sent in by Fran Foley, who's in Europe right now. Fran says the German stations are quite impressive and the sheer number of trains running is astounding. I saved the best for last. This video was taken by John Plocker after one of our legendary Taco Tuesday lunches. It's a shot of a garbage train running at a place called Main Street in Cupertino, California. If you have a catch you'd like to share, please email it to podcast@tsgmultimedia.com. Be sure you own the photo and let me know the what's, whens, and wheres of the shots you want to share. Anyway, now for this month's program schedule. On August 11th, that's this coming Wednesday, Michelle Kempema and I will go live with our monthly live call-in talk show. This month, I want to do a general hangout where we talk about whatever comes up. So be sure to be there so that you can add to the conversation. Then on the 13th, we have a product spotlight. On Saturday the 14th, it's a layout tour of Chuck Araftik's HO scale Boston and Albany transition era layout. You will not want to miss this one. On August 20th, we have another product spotlight. Then on the 21st, it's the Railtown 1897 photo tour event that I told you about earlier in the podcast. On the 27th, we have another product spotlight. Then on the 28th, it's the return of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. Finally, on September 3rd, we have one more product spotlight before the next podcast. Hey, did you know that TSG Train Crew members get to see most of the featured Saturday programs long before they get published to this channel? Not only that, but the Train Crew also gets that content in stunning 4K ultra high definition without ads. Anyway, I'd like to take a second to thank you for all your continued support. Reaching 10 million views is no small feat, and we did it together. So thanks. I also want to acknowledge the Patreon supporters for helping keep things going around here. You see their names during every podcast, and this time is no exception. Extra special thanks to all of you on the Train Crew. I couldn't do any of this without you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.